Folks, hello. How's it going? So, um, yeah. Here we are once again talking about the video games that I would make if I had the money, the knowledge, and probably the team to do so. Today we're talking about mecha games because chicks dig giant robots. And if you understand that reference, God bless. Not really, because I don't care. But good on you. Great show, Magus XLR. Great show. Good cartoon back in the day. Let's move on to, for some reason, my screen not wanting me to see what I'm talking about, but updating in OBS, because that's just how that works. Okay. Anyway, but first, before we talk about mechs, we need to go back to MMOs, because there was some stuff that I sort of forgot to talk about. However, don't worry, it pertains to this too. Trust me. Alright? So, I know I've said in the previous videos that I'm probably going to forget something, and it'll be like, oh man, I really should have talked about that. Well, yeah. And for that, it has to do with my idea for unique crafting, right? Now, I know I talked about, some unique crafting stuff before in MMOs, right? I was talking about how you could choose materials for the handle, the blade, the guard, the sheath, all that stuff. But more in depth is what I would want. Think of it like a sort of menu that allows you to completely design weapons and armor and how they look from like front, back, sides. You can think of it like pixel art, right? And you can, if you have like 2 bars of iron and 1 bar of copper, you can start adding material to certain places. However, it runs out of the material you were using, so you can only use a certain amount that you have, right? And then how much you add depends upon the material you use. Simple as that. I think it would be cool to allow for like branding and inscribing, to like put like a signature or like an emblem on them, so that crafters could put like their name or a logo on something. Like I know a lot of back in the day, sword crafters and blacksmiths, right? They would like engrave like their initials into it, or like if they had like a family crest, they would do that, stuff like that, And like I said, some of this stuff will be relevant to the mecha discussion a little bit later. We're not going to get into it right away because there's some stuff we have to talk about first, but that's there. But yeah, I think that's important. Being able to like think of it like the Minecraft skins, how you make those, where you're given like a flat surface, but each side is like an area of this flat like canvas, right? And then you can like kind of color in where you want stuff to be, but you can leave voids, right? And the voids would be, the things for the weapons and the armor. Like you could have a sword, right, that has like a huge gap in the middle to make it lighter or something. Yeah, kind of that stuff. Anyway, let's move on to the next part. So, we need to discuss something before we get into my mech game. We need to talk about Chrome Hounds. Now, what was Chrome Hounds? Well, it was an online PvP PvE game where you fought as mercenaries for basically one of 3 factions, right? And it had an offline mode, but the real attraction was the online mode. And it was chef's kiss, just perfect. It was great because there was like a map, and you would have to fight on that map, and you had like a choice of like 6 or more like different maps you could play on at any given time, really. And you could go against faction A or faction B because it was like a triangular map. So there was, 2 fronts to each side of your war. You could attack this faction or that faction and whatnot. And then whoever, like, on the front line raised their capture abilities up the highest, they would then capture that zone, and the battlefield would move on to the next zone in whichever direction the war was fighting, right? It was a really nice concept. For those of you who are familiar with For Honor, it is very much like that, if I'm remembering correctly. I think For Honor has a map, right? But anyway, it's cool. In my opinion, Chromehounds is one of the best mech games. It's even better than Armored Core or Mech Warrior. And do you want to know the reason why it's the best one? Because the mechs were fully customizable. They're not limited to specific looks, you know? It's not like, okay, I'm just gonna pick out a head, a chest, legs and arms, and weapons, and then that's my mech from like this pre-arranged assortment. Or in Mech Warriors, like I'm just gonna pick this particular mech, and then I'm gonna add the different weapons to it, but the look is gonna stay the exact same regardless of what I do, right? No. In Chromehounds, you could make like a amalgamation of things because they had these lovely little things called spacers that you could use to put like you could put the legs or the wheels or whatever you wanted to use first, put a spacer, and then you could put like guns on the spacer down there, and then you could put the cockpit above that spacer, and then you could put more guns on top and to the sides. There was also reactors and coolant stuff and all this other good jazz. You had armor plates as well. So one thing that was really fun is the fact that there was sort of this like dynamic of arms warfare, or like not arms warfare. What is it called when you're like an arms race? Right, that's what it's called. Where someone would invent this mech that would become kind of standardized, and that's what everyone would start using. They would all design it around this particular platform. And then someone else would come up with a counter to that mech that was even better, and people would start using that. There was like so many different types of mechs out there, and one that really stood out was one that used like the inverse, like reverse, like not bipedal legs, but the ones that go back like chicken legs, right? Those legs with a V-shaped like spacer on top of them, and then in front of the mech it would have a like array of guns just in the front, and then behind the guns would be the cockpit, and then in the back there would be the radiator and all that stuff with like armor plate behind it and armor plate on the sides. And the reason you did that is because it gives you a really narrow profile, and all your guns are pointed together, so you can just boom neutralize them. Another thing that was also frequently done is to put a shield in front of your cockpit in the front, and then have the guns kind of like peeking up over the back of your cockpit, like just barely, so they couldn't shoot your guns off. Because one thing that happened in this game is that every piece of your mech was destroyable. They could destroy your legs and wheels or whatever, and I'm pretty sure if they destroyed those, you just moved really slow, but you could still move. But if they destroy like your armor or your weapons would be completely useless. And the spacers and stuff, I think, would just break stuff that's attached to them. So if you have like a spacer from the cockpit, and then the spacer, and then guns, if you destroyed that spacer, I think it just destroys the guns automatically. And it has been a long time since I played it, so that could be wrong. But and then if your core gets destroyed, you die. Essentially, is how I remember it going. So you really had to protect that core piece. But yeah, it was great, right? And each faction had their own weapons and armor and equipment with different stats and stuff. They would all have like the same, okay, so they all have machine guns, or they all have like heavy cannons and stuff like that, right? But each one kind of was good at their own thing. Like, I think the red faction was really good at heavy guns and like artillery stuff. And then you had this like yellow or green faction that was really good at like, they had these like pile bunkers that were really good. So it encouraged you to swap factions to get all the equipment, because when you won a match, you would get rewarded with credits that you could buy different gear and stuff on. And there were different ways to achieve victory when you were doing the PvP stuff. You could, of course, just kill all your enemies and achieve victory that way. But you could also destroy the enemy base. It was like at the start of the match, you have this kind of like overview tactical advantage of the map, and you can choose one of, I think, 3 bases that you wanted to spawn at. Your enemy could do the same. They have 3 bases on their side of the map they can spawn at. So you don't know exactly which one they're at, but a common tactic that was used was they would have a really fast wheeled mech with pile bunkers on it, I would go to each base, like kind of around the map, take a long way, and your teammates, they would distract the enemy and defend the base, while you, the little pile bunker assassin mech, would go and just pile bunker the enemy base to death. There was another mech, which I used personally, which was an artillery mech. And the way artillery worked in the game was you didn't just like choose where you wanted it to land. You actually had to like use elevation. And I got really good at knowing, okay, so the map is this size, which means each grid square is like this many ticks of the elevation. So if I want to shoot and hit this grid square, I need to aim at this elevation. There was like a lot of math and stuff that had to go on. And I was like, okay, so if I'm from this square, I can go to this square, and then I can destroy this one base here. And so at the beginning of the match, I would just angle up and start unloading artillery through the air, arcing over, and it would take maybe 5 minutes of artillery shelling to destroy a base. But after that, if I hit the right base, we just won. But if I hit the wrong base, well, I would know I hit the wrong base, and I'd have basically half my ammunition gone, and I would begin to start supporting my teammates more. But it was great, right? It was also a slower paced and more tactical game compared to the others that are out there. Armored Core is really zippy. You fly around with, you know, the jets and stuff like that. But it's more of like I would say it's even slower than Mech Warrior, because you just like walk between buildings very slowly, and you have to think about where stuff is at. And they even had this like tactical array, like a sensor array, that a person could put on their mech. It weighed like 50% of your weight, so you couldn't do much. Like you couldn't have this and also be an amazing fighter, right? But it was called a commander unit, is what we used to call them, right? And with this, you would give like this huge area of radar range that you could see enemies coming into and allies. So you could basically say, okay, guys, we have the enemies in grid C5. There's 3 of them there. And we got one who's going around to F7, and they're trying to flank us. Be aware of that, right? You could, you know, kind of use that. But to counter that, they also had these nice little radar jammers, which would hide you from the enemy. They also took up quite a bit of your weight that was required and energy, but not as much as the commander unit. So if you wanted to be one of those guys who goes around and assassinates the base, you would want to put one of those on, right? But anyway, the developers of it are called From Software. You know, the people who make Dark Souls and Armored Core. I don't know why they haven't made Chromehounds 2. Hey, From Software, if you're watching this, or if you are someone who knows someone from Software, make Chromehounds 2. Tell them to make Chromehounds 2. That's all I need in this world is Chromehounds 2, and I'll be happy. Like, back in the day when Chromehounds was out, every day after school I was there playing with my squad, and we were dominating the heck out of the enemy. It was great. It was fun. I dumped probably thousands of hours into Chromehounds. If there's a Chromehounds 2, I will literally live, breathe, and sleep that game forever. Anyway, moving on, because that took a lot of time there. So yeah, let's talk about the customizability of mechs. Now this is going to be throwing back a lot of stuff to Chromehounds, which is why I talked about it, right? So this is like the first slide of like what I would do in my game, right? That's not just me ranting about Chromehounds. Okay. So the most important feature of a mech game is being able to make the mech your own, right? Sure, the games that are like Mech Warrior and Mech Assault they're fun, right? You can use these cool looking mechs, but the customizability is just a little lacking, right? In some of them you can't even change their weapons or anything like that, but in some of them you can, but it's just it's not a physical change, you know? You can't really change much other than the paint of the mech to change what it looks like, right? So the key here is to make it make the player be able to do more than just swap out body, limb, and weapon parts, right? Make modular parts, like in Chromehounds, so you can build truly unique mechs. That's what I'm talking about here. Give players the freedom to create the mech their way and use it in the way that they want. Give them a lot of camo patterns, colors. Just give them like a color picker wheel and let them choose whatever one for like the 3 main primary color, like areas of the mech for the camo, stuff like that. Let them be a solid color, right? In Chrome Hounds, there was this one NPC team camo that we called the Wonder Bread team because they were white with blue, red, and yellow polka dots. Dang Wonder Bread team. Hate those guys. Incidentally, I was part of a group called Toasters with Guns. If anyone out there is a member of Toasters with Guns and is watching this video, I hope you're having a great time in your life. FYI. Anyway, but yeah, the customizability is important, right? I don't want to have a game where the only thing I can choose is some minor details about my mech, right? Like, I want to be able to say, okay, so I want to throw wheels on this baby, or treads, or hover parts, or I want to throw in, the bipedal legs, or the chicken legs, heck, even 4, maybe 6 legs. Who the hell knows, right? And, of course, you need the place that your character is going to be controlling it from, like a cockpit. It could be something like the head unit is where the cockpit is, or a bulky kind of torso body looking thing. In Chrome Hounds, they look kind of like bulky plane fuselages in a way. They weren't like, there was no head part for Chrome Hounds. And then also, just have those unique spacer items. The things that you can throw on to like a node, kind of like a shoulder joint or something, right? And then it has 6 more parts, attachment areas to it that you can just attach whatever the heck you want. You can attach, other nodes, you could attach guns, you can attach, specialty equipment, all that kind of stuff. Let the player make their mech the way they want to make it. I know there was one type of mech which was hilarious that I had seen in Chrome Hounds before. It was some very thin chicken legs with just a bunch of vertical spacers going up with shields protecting all the spacers. And then they had a spacer going back, and then behind the spacer tower, they had their cockpit, which was shielded along with their radiator. And then at the top of this huge tower of spacers, they had a cluster of like sniper cannons that they would use to like look over buildings because their mech was so tall, and they could literally just go bloop, look over cliffs or mountains or whatever they wanted to do and just try to snipe you while the majority of their mech was behind cover. It was great. It was amazing. And that's the kind of customizability that I really want. Like, I want y'all to go. If you've never seen or played Chrome Hounds, I want you to go to Google right now. Just Google Chrome Hounds Mech, or Chrome Hound Mech Designs. How about that? And if you go to images and you just look, you'll see a lot that look like normie things, right? They just look like, okay, they have legs and a torso and a bunch of guns on them, right? But then if you look far enough, you'll find things that are like really interesting, like ones that'll have like wings made of guns and stuff like that. And just a bunch of different stuff there. A lot of the screenshots that I'm seeing while I'm scrolling down here, they are normie looking mechs. I don't see any of the unique custom ones. We type in unique mech designs. Is it going to show us anything different? Really, I think most of the stuff's shown. It's an older game that was for Xbox 360 when I was playing it. So it wasn't really on PC, so getting screenshots from it wasn't really that easy. You might be able to find videos of it, though, stuff like that. But I digress on that point. Let's move on. Let's talk about the actual mech parts we're going to be using, right? So we'll have the basic mech parts. Stuff like movement for, the legs, the wheels, the tracks, hovers, whatever you want to do. You'll have the cockpit, the engine, and the weapons. The basic stuff that makes up a mech, right? Now, we want to have utility items as well, like those spacers, like I was talking about, various armors. They can just be, solid rectangular metal plates. They could be circular, whatever you want. You can add radiators, which cool your weapons and stuff faster. Ammo packs, which allow you to have more ammo for your guns. sensor arrays to reveal enemies, sensor jammers, of course, etc. Anything else like that. You could do special equipment, things that allow you to convert the different things of your mech. So let's say that you have a mech that has a high energy capacity, but not a lot of weight. You want more weight. Well, you could add this on, which will convert the energy excess into weight, or vice versa. You can exchange the weight into energy. I think you can do this by having some like, if you think about the anime Knights and Magic, they have these mechs and magic, and the main character makes this like magic musculature stuff that's like twisted mana fibers or something like that, that are much stronger than like pistons and stuff would be. And that's one way you could like exchange like energy to weight. And then you can also, to exchange weight to energy, you could make like part of the body, like rather than having like pistons or that like muscular fiber in it, you could have like energy tanks in the shell of the armor or something like that, right? You could also get drones that you could like dispatch, like drones that would like shoot down missiles for you, or drones that would just shoot like machine guns at like nearby targets, or stuff like that, right? You have energy shields, add thrusters. You can get like a repair crane that will only repair nearby allies and not yourself. You could have smoke grenades, any of that stuff that's like out there, right? You could have. Also, I want to say, when I say thrusters here, I'm talking like armored core type thrusters where you can like do maneuvering stuff like that. However, the caveat to that with the thrusters is that they would have limited fuel that would not recharge, right? So another thing that could be special is thruster fuel, right? Bring more fuel for the thrusters. It'll allow you to like maneuver around really quick and dodge out of the way, but because your mech is heavy and you have limited stuff for it, you can only use it in certain situations, right? But yeah, like I say here, you want to make sure that everything kind of gives a trade-off, like the sensor array being heavy and use a lot of energy, so you have less offensive capability, so you can't just have people going around with a sensor array on, hunting down enemies by themselves, right? But yeah, and then parts should be bought or obtained in some way, and players shouldn't start with everything, right? So, like with Chrome Hounds, perhaps different factions sell different types of parts that are better and worse at some aspects, right? Interesting stuff. Moving on to the next part of our thing here. I believe you should be able to create unique parts. And this is where the MMO talk that I had discussed earlier comes in, right? Ideally, I think it would be amazing to have players be able to create parts. Now, give them access, like specific items, right? Like a reactor core that's just like a circular ball of like suspended energy. And then they can place like armor and connectors around it to make it look like a unique looking engine, right? And then this one part would be a like reactor core that you could just put on your mech, right? So you take the specific elements that each like part requires. Like for a reactor core, it would require one attachment point to attach it onto your mech, and then one reactor core element, right? So if you wanted to be really basic, you could put a reactor core with just a connector on it to have it be really small, but then have it be very exposed to the elements and the people around it, right? Or you could add a reactor core, connectors, and then also be able to put in like a specific extra part that boosts the energy output for it, for example, right? Something like that I think would be really cool. But yeah, another thing that I think would be cool would be making like energy emitting nodes that would create a hard light projection that can be used as a melee weapon. So if you think about like the Gundam series, think about their like beam swords or beam axes specifically. And if you combine them in like a specific design, you could create a sword, an axe, a scythe, whatever have you, right? So think of it like this one particular energy emitting node. Um, you have a variety of them. One of them just goes like projects like a straight like rectangular piece in front of it, right? Another one does kind of like a mushroom shape, right? And depending upon how you angle them, like if you put one facing directly up and then get two more that are kind of facing at 45-degree angles pointing inwards towards that one that's going up, so it kind of makes like a V shape, but with the energy parts going inward, it would kind of create a like spear kind of weapon, right? Because everything would be focused in one point direction. Kind of stuff like that. And then you kind of add on the elements of, adding a pole to make it a spear, or you give it like a handle and like a hilt for like a sword, something like that, right? Just kind of stuff like that. And I think also having a unique way to create armor combos, their way. So you can give them like a skeleton of a frame, right? So they have like the feet. If we're gonna say it's a bipedal mech that has two legs and it's got the knee parts and like the one like thing at the top, right? It's a basic frame. You can like adjust the height and like the thickness of it and stuff like that, and then you can just place like armor and stuff around it in like whatever design that you want to do, right? You can make it like really thick armor and whatnot, but of course for every piece of armor you add onto it, it's going to increase the weight that they weigh and reduce the amount of weight that they'll be able to carry, right? And you can choose between motion driven by normal pistons or stuff like muscle fiber, right? Or even like energy weird stuff. You can do whatever. It's a fantasy sci-fi thing, right? But let's let players share these part plans and share them with each other. That is the key part here. That way, if you have like a guild, you can be like, hey, I made this new reactor that's really high output and amazing. Take this and let's kick some booty, right? And you could even, at that point, since you're sharing stuff, it would add another element to the game, because people would be like, dang, this clan is like dominating us with this new mech they have. I have no idea how they made it. And you could be like, hey, you go join their group, earn their trust, and make them give you that plan. And once you get it, defect and come back to our clan. That way we can get those plans and fight back, right? It would add a level of subterfuge and trickery and spying to the game as well, right? Really cool. Next up, we have allowing customizability, but also allowing simplicity. Because not everyone wants to spend the time to create a new, unique mech, right? So we just allow for simple builds, stuff like mech warrior mechs and armored core mechs, for example. You just add default produced legs, torsos, head arms, weapons, the basic stuff. And also allow the sharing of mech blueprints. So if a player makes a mech, they can share it, and others can then craft the same mech if they have the parts for it. Additionally, allow the players to save mech builds so they can easily just load them in and out whenever they want. So if they want to go with a more like a sniper mech this match, they can just load that one in. If they want to go with a heavy gunner mech this time, they can swap that in, and they don't have to like spend an hour building it every time, right? That's the key component here. Next, we have the types of weapons that I would include in a game. Now, a lot of this stuff is going to be ended with etc., because there's just so many different weapons out there that, yeah, I'm probably going to forget one or two types, So you can have the usual machine guns, rockets, lasers, etc., and melee weapons that are made out of lasers or metal, pile drivers, stuff like that, etc. But then you can add on to that with like any kind of sci-fi thing you want. Like, what is Armored Core's like weird energy weapon thing? It's Kojima particles, I think is what they're called. And they have like energy stuff, right? It's like nuclear energy on steroids is what Google says here. But yeah, you can give them like nuclear powered stuff and crazy shit like that, right? But also like autonomous protection drones that shoot at nearby targets, or specifically focus on rockets, like I said earlier. You can give them artillery that can shoot over long distances in an arc to damage distant targets. You can give them the choice between using high explosive ammunition, armor-piercing ammunition, etc., etc. You can give them landmines, flashbangs, smoke grenades, heat-based weapons that overheat enemy weapons. So if you fire at someone and hit them, it increases their weapon overheating, so they can't shoot you back. Like flamethrowers, for example. You could use that. You could also, perhaps, if you wanted to use artillery, fire off napalm. Do that and make an area erupt and stuff like that. You know, anything you can think of as a weapon, throw it in there, make it amazing. People will enjoy it. Now let's talk about mech movement, because this is very important. So the fast floating mechs are cool, but I feel like they're pretty overdone, right? I feel like mechs should come in various speeds, you know? There's so many games out there that are like Gundam or Armored Core, where your mech doesn't really touch the ground ever. It's like just flying around on these, you know, thrusters that make it like really fast and stuff like that, right? I think we should take that, but also have slow multi-legged or tracked mechs that fire heavy weapons like a battleship. Or we have fast wheeled or hover-based mechs that are lightly armored and armed, but can carry out flanking maneuvers and assassinations. You can also have the all-rounder mechs that are like the classic two-legged ones that stomp around the battlefield doing their thing. And the very most important one here, I would say, for a game that I would make, is the limited use thrusters for fast maneuvering, right? Have like fuel tanks for when those run out, you can't use them anymore. This way you have to like think when you use them, right? Because in Armored Core, you can basically just fly around until they overheat, and then they just recharge or whatever, or cool down. But in my game, I would say you have this amount of fuel, doing like a quick dodge or using them to like boost yourself forward and like fly around lowers the amount of fuel you have until you run out. And after that, your thrusters become basically useless, right? So I think a neat little way to make people have to like think and make it a little more realistic would be to have the fuel run out. Because then you don't have a mech that's just flying around the battlefield or up in the air, raining down missiles that home into everyone from above, while you have mechs that are tracked or four-legged that are tromping around the battlefield at like 5 miles an hour, not being able to really fight back because they don't have the thrusters or the way to do that. And instead, you have the mechs, have to think about when to use it, right? So you can have the thrusters, and you'll be walking around normally most of the time, but then when you finally get into an engagement, and you see someone fires like artillery up in the air, and it's about to rain down on your position, and use the thrusters to like jump out of the way, for example. Or if you're fighting someone, you can use the thrusters to maneuver around behind them before they have a chance to rotate their torso around to point their guns at you, for example. Just kind of stuff like that. Oh, also, I do want to point out one thing that I just thought of here that I remember in Chrome Hounds. You could have different weapon groupings on your mech. So, like, you could press, like, right trigger to fire one type of weapon, left trigger to fire another set of weapons. Okay? One thing that I am pretty sure I remember making in that game, I think, is I had a mech that was kind of not utilitarian. It functioned in two different ways. I had it have snipers on the front, but I also had like machine guns pointed backwards, so that I could just like look back and like walk backwards and like fire at the enemy as well, if they like snuck up behind me that way. So that way I could do multiple things at once and not have to turn around my back. I think that's cool too. Just throwing that out there. But yeah, moving on to what kind of game it would be, right? There's so many genre types to use, right? Like you could make it like a generic shooter like Armored Core and stuff like that, right? But then you could also make it like Chrome Hounds, where it's a faction-based PvP to conquer the continent. You could make it a mecha MMO. All the MMO elements I talked about previously on the previous video, just with mechs, where, when you're playing the game and you're in a city, you're a small little human, right? And then when you leave the city, basically to leave a city, you go to a mech hangar, get into your mech, and then outside of the city is where you're in a mech. Like, you could have this, like, fantasy world where an alien attack caused humans to have to go into these, like, huge, sprawling cities that are now defended by huge cannons, and mechs are the only thing that can go outside, because if anything else goes outside, they'll be overwhelmed by these giant, mutant, alien-looking things that are, like, 5-story tall, right? You could make it an RTS and have command mechs, right? Think like BattleTech, where command your mechs and do stuff like that. You could even add magic to give them, that fantasy feel, and combine guns with magic spells. Like, instead of like just normal missiles on their back, like think the catapult mech from BattleTech and stuff like that, right? Where they have those huge like missile pods, but instead of firing missiles, they fire like ice sickle spells, like rain down upon you or something like that, or something like that, right? Or you can mix all the genres together if you want. You can make an MMO that has warring factions fighting on a front line that allows parties to have a commander that doesn't fight themselves, but will instruct their party on how to fight, like an RTS, right? And then you can also use the MMO feature that everyone loves of the PvP battlefields to go into that simulator combat that Chrome Hounds and like the 6v6 type of games usually allow you to do, where it's not like a huge 100 versus 100 battlefield, but it's a smaller like squadron taking stuff on, right? You could even add dungeons into the MMO, and I think that would be kind of it. But there's so many things, limitless possibilities you could do with mechs, right? That I just think would be great. Additionally, destructive environments are a must. The worst thing in a mech game is when you're a huge mech, but you get caught on a tree, or like the edge of a building, or like you stub your toe on a car and your mech just like stops and you're like, the heck? Even though you're like 9 stories tall and literally just push a building over with a thought. So let's say you're in a city and unable to see over a building, and the nearest way to the other side is having to take a minutes away detour. You can just destroy the building, whether by walking through it if you're heavy enough, or shooting it with artillery and stuff like that to destroy it and put a hole through the building and walk through. Because this allows you to set up ambushes, lure an enemy into an area, and then destroy the buildings next to them to flank them. Or you can just level the entire city before you even engage, so that the enemies can't flank you, You can do that. You could lure them into, like I was saying with ambushes, into like a dead end, and when they think they got you, your teammates who are standing on the other like roads parallel to that just shoot inwards to the buildings, shoot through the buildings as they're getting destroyed, and destroy the enemy team that way. Just beautiful, beautiful destruction that I think is necessary for every single mech game out there. Additionally, we have environmental effects, right? So if you're fighting in a desert, or if you're standing in lava, it would increase the heat produced by your weapons, and also touching lava could damage your parts, so it could damage your legs or whatever part is touching it. If you're standing in water or you're in a snowy environment, the heat produced by your weapons would cool down faster, and deeper water could make you slower if you're using legs or something and not hovers, for example, right? Uneven ground could cause legged mechs to be a lot slower, having to go up them or down them. But wheeled mechs or tracked mechs wouldn't be affected as much. You could also have snow or sandstorms that cause visual issues, where you can't see very far in front of you, and then you can just like use flanking a lot. Or you could have electronical storms, like solar flares and stuff like that that are happening and ongoing that cause you to have issues with lock-on times or homing missiles veering off course and stuff like that. There's endless possibilities of things you can do with your game to have it be just amazing and unique, right? And then, of course, we have to talk about combat damage. So when you're fighting, your mech should be taking damage from enemy shots. No. When you're taking damage, your armor should appear to be getting destroyed. And it should be destroyed completely at a certain level, right? So, like if you have a just rectangular plate of armor in front of your cockpit, and it takes some damage, it should look damaged, right? And then if it gets destroyed, it should just fall off and no longer be there. Weapons should also get destroyed. You could say if they take so much damage, they then start firing slower, or they jam sometimes, or something like that, right? And if they're destroyed, they're just useless. If you're using legs, wheels, whatever, if they get damaged, you move slower. You could target someone's like knee joints if they're using legs, or you can target their wheels if they're using wheels, and it would, slow them down. I just think that's a very important feature of any mech game, is being able to destroy parts of the enemy mech, right? Really nice. And I think that is all. Yep, that is all the slides we have prepared here for our mech game. Right, so there's a lot of stuff out there that, honestly, I think it's great. Cool to do. And, honestly, I just want to make Chrome Hounds 2, but better. That's really all I want. I would make Chrome Hounds 2 if I had the ability to do so. But I would make it, like I said, with some extra stuff. Like, I would have it actually have thrusters where you could, like, maneuver around, but also have that limited, right? I'd also make it a little more of a MMO with, like, bigger battles, potentially. But all in all, my ideal mech game is Chrome Hounds. It's just a shame that Chrome Hounds no longer exists. There was another game called, what was it called? I think it was called something start with a mag. Yeah, so there's a game called MAG, right? And it is like a, oh no, is it mag or Mav? Mav, sorry, M-A-V as in Victor. It is a game on the PC that is, I would say, basically a Chrome Hounds clone. It looks very similar to what you could do. And honestly, if you actually look up the Mav game and you just type in like mechs, it'll give you a bunch of these weird looking mechs. And this is what I was talking about with Chrome Hounds, where you would see these weird mechs out there that, for whatever reason, just look weird. Like this one I'm looking at right now has legs and then a spacer, and then the spacer goes like forward really far and has like a huge shield on the front of it, and then it has like more shields on the side and stuff like that. It's a very interesting design, I'll give it that. Yeah, there's a bunch. There's like one that looks like it's a tracked vehicle that has a shield in front of it and then guns pointed up over the shield. Very nice looking. But yeah, this game, it came out a while ago. I'm not even sure when it did come out. I could not find like a release date. What if I search release date? Does Google say anything? No. All I see is like Maverick stuff from ESPN, fortunately. But I'm not sure when it came out. It definitely has very dated graphics, and I'm just not sure what the like playability of it would still be, if there's like even a player base for it. I do see there are some character stories that were posted on the original site that are from 2018. It's the last one, June 4th, 2008. And before that, looks like the first one came out in June 2017. So it's at least a 6 or 7 year old game, but it's out there, right? I'm sad I didn't see it when it released, because I would have played the hell out of it. But yeah, we just need a new one that has better graphics and all that stuff. And like I said, the key component is being able to customize your mech, customize the parts of your mech. That'd be one of the great things, right? Just so good. Anyway, I don't really think there's much else that I need to talk about at the moment. So, yeah, I think we're done. That's it for the mech games. Now, I have one more game type that I am going to talk about, that I know I'm going to talk about. Sitting here thinking about all the different game genres, there's not really one that I think of, that I can think of that I want to do other than this other one. I could just talk generically about first-person shooters, but that'd be more of me just rambling on about the current state of first-person shooters and how much I hate them, not necessarily what I would, do. Maybe I will talk about one at some point, but for now, there's this video, and there's going to be another one at some point, and that one is going to be about adult games. You know the ones. So sit tight and look out for that one, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye for now.